Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the 1-0 podcast. I'm Joel Haas.
I'm Lyle Allenstein.
And I'm Lexi Linderman.
Today, we'll talk about Penn State's recent hiring of running backs coach Stan Drayton, most recently the head coach at Temple, who comes in to replace Jaywan Sider. And then we'll touch on the proposed expanded college football playoff with kind of some rumors swirling about that now. But we'll jump into it, guys. Penn State got its guy at running backs coach, and dare I say it's an upgrade over what they had before. But what are your initial thoughts on Stan Drayton?
I think it's a good hire for Penn State. Obviously got fired from Temple, didn't have the best track record there. I think he was 9-25 across the time there. Not very good, but he has a very long history of being a good running backs coach. I think he's been coaching running backs since the early 1990s, maybe late 1990s. I don't know the exact dates on that. But, he's developed premier NFL talent. Ezekiel Elliott, Bijan Robinson, won a national championship with Ohio State as a running backs coach and Florida as a running backs coach. So I think the resume is definitely long, it's extensive, it's good. And I think this is a really good hire for Penn State just in so many different ways. I think considering how late Jaywan left the program, I think this is the best option that was out there for them. And, they were able to get that. And I also just think this is going to be good for Nick and Catron just because he's also spent time in the NFL. He kind of knows the NFL running back style. I think this is going to be good for them as they look to get drafted in 2026 as well. And I also think from the recruiting aspects, good as well, just because of the East Coast ties, Pennsylvania ties, everything like that. But overall, I think good hire for Penn State from first initial impressions.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joel. I think upgrade, definitely. You have to remember, I think before he became a head coach at Temple, he was the cream of the crop when it comes to running backs coaches. So I think this is a very good hire. James Franklin talked about in his winter press conference before Sider, confirming Sider left, that he said something along the lines of the list is shorter than you would think. And I think the list was Stan Drayton. You had DeMarco Murray got reported at one point, but I think DeMarco Murray, obviously he's the Oklahoma running back coach. I think his name has popped up in running back coaches searches since he went to Oklahoma, and every year I think he just tries to get more money. So I don't really think that was actually a real thing. But I really think the list came down to Stan Drayton and go get Stan Drayton because Franklin talked about, because of the timeline with everything, the financial implications with the buyouts, guys under contract. This guy he was unemployed. He came off of getting fired from Temple, so it made it easier. No contract details obviously have been reported yet, but it's a good hire. Lexi just spoke to NFL talent he's developed with Ezekiel Elliott, Bijan Robinson. List goes on. Brian Westbrook, Carlos Hyde, goes on and on. Recruiting. This is a guy who's got, obviously Franklin talked about, who's someone who's got ties to the Pennsylvania area. Obviously coached at Temple. He played, I forget if it was Division II or Division III, but he played at Allegheny College. He was an All-American for whatever division it happened to be when he played football there. And he's got recruiting ties, in the Northeast. You've got Midwest. You've got all over the country, really. He's been everywhere. He was responsible for getting Cam Newton, or played a large role in getting Cam Newton to Florida, obviously before he went to Auburn. And there's, obviously, you talk about guys that James Franklin, when he goes out and hires, you want the ties to the staff, especially also with his players. But it's important to have that connection. Phil Trautwein was on that Florida team that won the national championship in 2006 when Stan Drayton was the running backs coach. I wonder if we'll get to hear any stories about that Florida team with some of the guys that are on there, but that's just a different story. But anyway, I think it's a good hire. Obviously, we haven't heard from him yet, so we'll see what his comments were. But I think overall impressions, this was the best guy. You can make an argument, even if this was earlier in the process, that he'd be among a top-tier contender, but considering how late it was with Sider's departure with the playoffs and season ending and everything, I think that's the right guy they got.
Yeah, I tend to think this is a great hire for Penn State for a lot of the reasons that you guys kind of already touched on. Obviously, it didn't pan out for him at Temple, but it's a hard place to win. Does it pan out for anyone at Temple? That's a program that's probably not top 100 historically.
Is that where Khalil Ahmad went, or no? Am I blanking?
No. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
Yes, it is. Yes.
He's a
trade.
GM for so a little trade there for Penn State, but I think Penn State comes out on the winning end of that one, I would say, and like you guys mentioned, he's obviously got the ties to Pennsylvania, which helps a lot. He's not from Pennsylvania, he's from Ohio, but has coached at, or like you mentioned, played at Allegheny, which is in Pennsylvania, and then he coached at Penn, Villanova, and Temple, which are 3 schools in Philadelphia. He has a ton of experience, has been coaching for a long time, and like you guys mentioned, has coached a lot of great players throughout the years, and he checks another box that James Franklin likes, which is former head coaches. Obviously, that's the path he went with, Manny Diaz and Tom Allen. In the past, he kind of likes to bring those guys in when they have that experience running a program. No matter how successful it was, like regardless, that experience is still pretty valuable. So I think it's a pretty great hire for Penn State. I guess it remains to be seen whether or not it's an upgrade over J1. I think we kind of want to wait and see what actually happens on the field before we can make an assessment on that. But regardless, I think if you're Penn State, you have to be really happy with how things turned out with your coaching staff, because you had 2 coaches get poached, and then you went out and got one of the best defensive coordinators in college football, maybe the best, and one of the best running backs, coaches in college football. So you can't really be mad about the way that anything really went there. So, and then like you guys kind of said, like with Nick and Katron, it's, they're heading into their 4th year. It's like at this point they're kind of plug and play. Like there's not too much on the development side that you have to do with them. So I think Penn State's running back room for the foreseeable future should be fine, especially with some of the guys they have. One of the question marks is Messiah Mickens, who's had a really interesting recent history. He was one of Penn State's first commits. I think maybe was the first commit in that 2026 class. And then after his commitment to Penn State, was still getting offers from some other big-name schools. I believe USC, Georgia, or a few of them who offered, and I think he posted on Twitter, blessed to be offered by these universities. All that comes after he's committed to Penn State. And then I think about a month ago, he tweets that his recruitment is officially shut down. Like it's officially closed, and he's not, interested in any other schools. He's locked in with Penn State, which he was already, committed, but he would locked it down. And then J1's departure obviously changes things, because now he's tweeting again that he's picking up more offers and things like that from other schools, and I believe he has some official visits planned. So it sounds like he's kind of opening some things up. That could be something interesting to monitor for Penn State, that they could lose one of their top recruits in that 2026 class. But I just thought that was interesting. I don't know if you guys had any extra thoughts on Mickens.
Well, today, obviously, you talked about when he tweeted out he was locked in. I was obviously, he had no idea Zeyda was going when he tweeted that. So that's that. But today he locked in his official visit to Penn State for the summer. But there were reports going around that now he's open to being recruited again. Obviously, he's still committed. Wouldn't be surprised if he decommits, right? But this is a guy nothing's been official yet, but I think he's got interest. He talked about schools that he might want to go check out are South Carolina, Missouri, North Carolina, and obviously Notre Dame. J1's they have a very close relationship. But it's being the first guy to commit that early to a class, regardless of how things pan out, things can change between now and then. So you never really know. Penn State's really the only other school that he's been to. He's taken officials, unofficials, committed. Obviously, he's Harrisburg, I believe. So this is easy to get here. And then the only other school he took a visit to was, I think, this past summer. He went to South Carolina, where he took an official with Lex Cyrus, Susquehanna Township wide receiver that Penn State fans really thought that they were going to go get. But then, obviously, that changed. But I think it was because he had a 7-on-7 tournament in the area. So this is a guy who's always been committed. But it's obviously things change now. But the way recruiting works, if he decommits between now and then, it's whatever. He's a chance to recommit. Obviously, I think he's had a phone call with Stan Drayton since he's been hired. But go take the visits. If I'm Mickens, I wouldn't be surprised. But if you're committing just for a running backs coach, I don't really think that makes a whole lot of sense. Do I think it plays a role? Yeah, but when he goes to inevitably goes to Notre Dame, he's going to talk to Freeman. You got to make sure you're a fit, because at the end of the day, Penn State's the easiest school for him to get to, right? So he's going to have that opportunity to be back in the summer, in the fall, whatever. This recruitment, I think, will go the whole way. And if he goes somewhere else, not surprising. I don't even think it'll necessarily be Notre Dame, because a position coach obviously plays a big role, and when it just happens so suddenly, you have to reevaluate your options. Unless he committed for Franklin, but he didn't. Right when that Cider news happened, he tweeted a picture from him camping with J1 and when he was giving him feedback. So we'll see what happens. I think there's other implications other than Mickens. You look at 2027 running back commit Keeman Spall from McKeesport. It's that's even longer, and he had a change in running backs coach. But so obviously we'll see what happens. Penn State's got other running backs on board. This is a good place to go play running back if you recruit. So you always have to think about that when you're factoring in these things.
Yeah, I think the other interesting thing with that is that Stan Drayton is only on a 1-year deal. So by the time Mickens even gets to Penn State, Stan Drayton might not even be coaching at Penn State just because of that 1 year deal. So I also think it's just one of those things where it's like Lyle said, I don't know if like anyone should really put their entire recruit on like a position coach for him. Like obviously J1. I just think that I just don't think that that's how that works just in general. Like you're committing to the entire program. Obviously you're talking with the position coach a lot, but you're also talking with the head coach a lot. Like I just don't think. And then also like I just think Franklin's obviously going to do what he can to keep him committed, and I think that they just have a good chance to keep him just because, Saquon Barkley just won the Super Bowl in Pennsylvania after growing up in Pennsylvania, committing to play in Pennsylvania. I think it's just like the whole best in PA, stay in PA thing. Just won the Pennsylvania Gatorade Player of the Year. Like, this is a guy that, like, and Penn State's running back room is, like, littered with talent from Pennsylvania. So I just think Franklin has a very good pitch to give him, even if he thinks about decommitting. But I just think, obviously, like, like Lyle said, go take the visits. Just, like, make sure, like, Penn State is where you want to be. But I just think if he's really just, like, putting all of his, like, all his cards, like, going all in with J1, like, I just think that's
big poker player.
Yeah. I could see that.
I just think that's just, like, a little weird. I don't think that's necessarily, like, the full story of why he even, like, would decommit.
Well, yeah, I think this is kind of a case of, like, he got that big offer from Penn State, and as an in-state guy, like, jumped on it, committed, and then started to have second thoughts and starts to get other offers that he maybe didn't know he was going to get, and then kind of rethinks things. And then, as soon as J1 leaves, I think that was kind of like, the last straw that kind of pushed him, and now he's really kind of exploring other options. So it'll be interesting to follow. Obviously, he's a guy that Penn State would like to keep, but regardless, I think the state of the running back room will probably be fine either way, just given the talent in it and some of the other guys they have committed as well. We can pivot into our next topic, which is the expanded college football playoff, which this year was the expanded college football playoff. Now it's getting potentially more expanded. Everything so far is just reports, but sounds like the Big Two, the Big Ten and the SEC want to push for either 14 or 16 teams. They want an expanded playoff. On top of that, they want 4 auto qualifiers from each of those 2 conferences. And then they want to get rid of the sort of, the seeding model where you get, conference winners in the top 4. They want to just do whatever the rankings are at the end of the season, put them in that order, which would change things pretty substantially because you wouldn't have, like, Boise State at 3 or anything like that we saw this year. So I don't know. What do you guys thought? Like, are you guys in favor of expanding the playoffs even more?
I think that I don't know. I think 12 was okay for now. I think like they obviously just want more money. So I think like no matter what, it's going to be expanded. But I think you have to cap it somewhere, and I think 14 is probably where they should cap it if they're even going to expand. I don't think because once you reach 16, it's like only 9 teams in the top 25 at that point like aren't making the playoff, and it's like the gap between the number 1 team in the country and the number 16 team in the country is supposed to be like 15. Like it's supposed to be like that big, and so I think that if you have those like 2 programs vying for the same thing, like it just doesn't make sense to me. But I do think the seeding thing is a change that needed to be made. I think. Obviously having those auto bids is important just for the playoff, but I think having them automatically be the top 4 seeds was not good for the playoff. Like we saw, with Boise State getting the number 3 seed. And I think Arizona State, like, wasn't a top 4 team, but at least they, like, kind of proved that, like, maybe they like, possibly deserve to be that high, taking Texas to overtime and everything. But, so I think the new seeding format is good for the playoff. I don't necessarily think expanding it more is good for the playoff just because there were so many people still, arguing with the 12-team playoff about, like, the gap in talent. Like, when Notre Dame's blowing out Indiana, and they're like, well, like, this is why it should be a 4-team playoff because there's all these gaps in talent. So I think you expand it even more. You're going to hear that even more. But, like, obviously, the college football just wants money. Like, ESPN wants money. Like, the conferences want money. And so I think at the end of the day, that's what's going to come down to. I just don't necessarily think it's good for like fan engagement going forward.
I agree with how the seeding needs to be restructured. I think you could still restructure it with the 12 team, but when they changed it from 4 to 12, I never really thought the 12 team would like actually last for very long. Don't get me wrong, I think this is a quicker turnaround than I anticipated. But my whole with all these rumors going on, and we're going to get a better idea of this next Tuesday. I think there's going to be a meeting again. I just met today, but I have a very like broad perspective on this. But with the whole Big Ten, SEC like monopoly basically that's going on with this, because I forget what the 16-team proposed structure was, but with the 14, it's SEC, Big Ten, each get 4 auto bids, right? ACC gets 2. Big 12 gets 2. What's that's 12? You get the G5. And then you've got a protected independent clause or something.
It's just the next highest. It's just like an at-large.
But yeah,
which
but
would
like,
be Notre Dame.
Yeah, so like
almost
so but like
every
it
year.
basically just protects Notre Dame, because I thought like in these conversations there would have been some element of favoring conferences, but that just protects Notre Dame, so that doesn't mean to make them join them, because I think they're like restructuring how conference championships works because they're not getting rid of it. But my take on this with the whole Big Ten SEC thing is that clearly they have more power. Obviously, in the proposal and all everything, the reports that are going around, ACC, Big 12 commissioners, everyone like has a say, but they don't, because Big Ten and SEC are just the two best conferences. We heard James Franklin talk about it around the playoff, like before the seeding came out, and how they deserve to be represented more so. But with the more teams being represented, it's more money, right? It's these both conferences who bring in the most money, and then there's also the whole like SEC plays one less conference game than everybody, so they're going to change that, because with the new way all these Big Ten and SECs get more of a chance, obviously they are more represented. Conference schedules matter more, and the non-conference really doesn't, because you're competing against the conference to get these spots. So you're getting also the non-conference games that you have, whatever, because part of the proposal that isn't being anticipated is that Big Ten and SEC are just going to have a scheduled game against each other every single year. It doesn't really affect your out-of-conference menu, because it brings in more money to the universities, more of all these network deals and TV sponsorships and whatnot. So it's just you're becoming power hungry, and this is where my really broad take comes in. 5 to 10 years from now, right? College football it's SEC versus Big Ten. They're gonna go away. It's gonna become their own thing, and college football is gonna be ruined because of all these. Like when you get that playoff, if it becomes 16 teams and all of a sudden more SEC and Big Ten teams could be represented, they're like, what's stopping us? We're the two best, AFC, NFC, whatever you want to call it. Like, I think this is the direction we're headed in right now.
Well, that's what I don't want.
I agree with you.
Like
I don't
those two
want that
conferences
either.
to take over. So I would like to obviously maintain the representation, whether it's like ACC and Big 12 getting teams in, which, they would get 2 teams in with the proposed model, and the group of 5 would get the 1 auto qualifier. But, when you take away the automatic seeding, those guys all just get thrown in probably at like, whatever, like 13, 14, 15 seeds, things like that. I don't know. It's interesting. I did think, I think we all thought it was inevitable that they would go to 16 at some point. Like when you go to 12, it's such an odd number. It's like, yeah, they have to go up to 16 next. Like that just felt like it was coming. Again, yeah, like you said, I didn't think it would come this quickly. And this would be for 2027, the 2026 season.
Yeah.
Ending in 2027.
26, 27
Yeah.
season. So it wouldn't be this next season, but still, that would be kind of interesting to see. And then I also thought the other thing was that the 4 teams this year that got first-round byes lost. Like the 4 teams 1 through 4 all lost in their first game. They're getting rid of byes if you go to 16. But if you go to 14...
But then you're playing like the
yeah.
G5, whatever. Like Penn State got rewarded for losing the Big Ten championship.
But then you're also playing so many games in a season. Like at that point, because then you're getting rid of conference championships. Like that's going.
Because I think with the conference, because that's how they're reevaluating. Because I think if the 4 bids go to be the SEC and the Big Ten, it's like the first 2. I think it's like the first 2 seeds are automatically qualifiers. But then it's like a 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 winners play each other, like for the seeding in the playoff. I think it's like something like that. So it's like not even like how you finish the regular season, because it gives you like, it's like that Iowa, like might not be in the playoff if the top 4 teams, make it. But if you get rid of the conference championship, they get a chance to compete in like a play-in tournament. I think that's how what it was like referred to as. You might see them in the playoff, which is unreal, because like there's definitely going to be seasons where an ACC or a Big 12 team, that third best team, is better than the 4th, whatever, ranked Iowa that makes it from the Big Ten. Sorry, Iowa, you're catching a straight here, but you've been middle of the pack for a while.
Yeah. I mean, if they had 16 teams this year, we would have had 3 more SEC teams in the playoffs, because we would have had Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss.
Right.
And then the other one would have been Miami. But,
back.
yeah, I don't know. I think at the end of the day, this just favors the SEC and the Big Ten more, and it's probably inevitable that it'll happen at this point. Like, it's still just reports, but like like no one's going to have the power to really stop this if this is what like the big two conferences want to happen. I don't know. Do you guys think it impacts Penn State at all?
I think Franklin prides his program so much on like family aspects, so like culture, whatever, and how he like hates the business that college football has become. And I think that this just makes it so much more of a business than an actual college football program. And I think that like how does Penn State adjust that? Like how do they? I mean, obviously this is basically gonna put them in the playoff like almost every year, like, and so that's good for that.
Well, and anyway, yeah.
Unless we get another pandemic or sanctions.
I mean, like, I don't think it benefits Penn State for making the playoff.
Yeah.
But, like, I think with the recent era, I mean, this is me obviously predicting the future here with how Penn State's team look. But, like, you look at Penn State would have made the playoff.
I mean, yeah, they should be top
teamer?
12 realistically. So
yeah.
the
so
difference,
it's just like
yeah.
So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so like they'll be making the playoff almost every year. So like from that, they're getting more money. Like that's good for like brand outlook. But like, how is that impacting the locker room? How is this impacting the transfer portal? How is this impacting NIL? Just like all of that. Like there's so like now it's just gonna become so much more of a business. Then also like the whole Bo Perbilo situation, that's just gonna be happening 10 times more because of how long this playoff is now gonna be with 14 or 16 teams. And it's like Franklin was very adamant that he thinks that like this is just a bad like setup for college football where, you know, players should not have to make a decision on their future while the team is still playing, you know, in a playoff. And so I think just all those problems are gonna be like tenfold. Like all of that is gonna increase a ton. But it's like at the end of the day, the Big Ten SEC just want money, so they don't really care. They don't care about the players. They're not. Well, I mean, I guess they care about the players, but they're not worried about all of that. So I think it just like I think we're just gonna be hearing more and more and more, especially from Franklin, that like there should be a commissioner in college football. It's like, will that ever happen? Like, no, because the Big Ten SEC are just gonna keep running it the way they want to run it. So I don't know. It's just a whole.
My take. This is I think when I look at it from a Penn State lens, obviously this is more of like still a national thing, but with the Big Ten and the SEC getting all this favoritism, I'm going to call it favoritism. Like, regardless of they're the two better conferences. That's what it is. I look at it from because NIL obviously still a thing, but I look at it from the whole new revenue sharing thing that's going on. And if this proposal goes through with the 4 bids, the Big Ten, SEC gets that number per wins in these playoffs and all this money allocated to them jacked up. I remember, I think when we were Florida, Orange Bowl.
Miami.
Yes, I think after the press conference, I wrote it like when Franklin and Freeman were talking about conference, non-conference, whatever. I wrote in my story how Notre Dame benefits from being an independent with how the current structure works because they're making so much more money because it's all going to them and not necessarily the conferences like Texas and Penn State, Ohio State, because they're all SEC, Big Ten get a portion. This completely like blows that out of the water in terms of I don't obviously have the exact numbers off the top of my head. Yes, Notre Dame is still going to get all that money to themselves, but it's way more that Penn State is bringing in, all these Big Ten SEC schools. And you look at that, you get more money that you can allocate however you want amongst staff, players, whatever. But James Franklin, it's not how he operates a program. Mm-mm. You said he doesn't want you – they don't look – I think it was Andy Frank, whatever, when we had him for like around signing day, where he was talking about NIL – that's just what you're looking for as a player, you should not be coming here. If you're good enough, like you're the Drew Allers, the Nick Singletons, the Abdul Carters of the world, like you'll get your money, whatever. And obviously this offseason, Nick Singleton had all those rumors of schools throwing an absolute bag at him to transfer. But he talked about his loyalty, you know, he was here for a reason. But like, and then I think, because like how it works right now, I think with underclassmen, unless you're one of these top tier players who's bringing home these extra deals outside of the program, you're on a contract system with how it works. Freshmen get A, sophomores get B. Like obviously that money, I think it starts at like 20, it's around the 20,000 range. Like I don't have obviously that number exact, but it's just like there's no like it's gonna haywire. I don't think that's something you can manage, especially with how much money you're gonna be bringing in, the direction that Big Ten and SEC are getting favored. Like there's gonna be more money coming in. But there's also more of an incentive to go play in the Big Ten and the SEC, especially if my prediction, becomes right and they're their own separate entity down the road. It's like, why on earth would you go play anywhere else? Yeah, you could talk about the development. You like the position coach, but you can be a random guy that hardly sees the field and you can financially do enough to provide for the future, which obviously a lot of these guys want to go to the NFL, but a lot of these players also don't have that same kind of caliber of talent to make it there or might not even have that same drive. So it's just the sport's being changed clearly because of this.
They could just go to 64. Do what basketball does.
Well, I
And-
mean,
and then
The basketball
CTE.
tournament is awesome.
yeah, but basketball might get changed too.
Well, just
Yeah.
cut the season in half, and then
There's also like the whole
who is the
pending.
64 team
Well,
this year?
I also just think that like, because then if you keep expanding the playoff at that point, like you're looking at like the regular season matters, but like then it's like what really matters is like you're playing a whole like second season like de facto at that point. So it's like, okay, you lost like week 5 to like I don't know like Oregon, and it's like, well, it doesn't matter because you're gonna play like 4 or 5 games in the playoff anyway to a national championship. It's like all that matters is that you're peaking then. And I
And
think
you lost to unranked Michigan in
Yeah.
this hypothetical
in this
example that we're talking
hypothetical.
about.
Yeah, no, that totally would never happen. IRL.
no, never.
Also, the
Honestly.
number 64 team per FPI this year was UNC.
Mm.
Notably lost to UConn in the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. I watched that game in an airplane, but
I'm sure you did.
that's who the 64th team
That's
would have
probably
been
Bill
this year.
Belichick though, so I'm
Yeah,
sure they're going
facts.
up.
Mm,
Sure they're
That's
going
true.
up.
Yeah, I also just think like because then at this like you're just gonna have the same programs at the top and like it's already trending that way anyway. So then it's like it's just gonna like it's literally just gonna be like the same 10 teams like every year.
Like in theory, but like the other thing with this.
Well, yeah, for the Big Ten, it's going to be Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Oregon every year.
Right.
Are going to be the top 4.
Yeah.
Like, what team is going to
like I don't really see like
jump one of them for the
Washington
top
like
4.
having a shot. You know,
like USC maybe if they actually like figure something out?
Iowa if they can learn how to play offense.
Yeah.
Nah.
Okay, but like you're also, like Washington's made 2 playoffs. Like this is not like some bump. Like it's not like
Okay,
a bump
yeah, but that was like
organization.
Kalen DeBoer, Michael. Like let's relax.
But like I'm just saying like in like
Okay, there obviously can be like a team that comes out like Rutgers. I guess in theory you can argue their recruiting has been immaculate like lately with Greg Schiano, but like
immaculate is well,
immaculate for Rutgers. For Rutgers. For Rutgers.
Best in program history.
Best in program history. But like the other thing with this is the house settlement, right? Because you've got rosters potentially getting cut, so it's everyone's getting paid. You're not having those. Everyone's a scholarship guy that probably gets jacked up with more money going on. But there's also like I think in just either June or July, like I think when we were at now I'm getting all my games confused. Arizona Fiesta Bowl. James Franklin was asked about how much does it cost to build a playoff roster,
Yes.
and he did not answer. But it's either
a
June.
lot of money.
It's either in June or July. Like that number is getting out. If you're a public university, you have to reveal the spendings on your players, which is it's going to get out. And like I think Big Ten and SEC, like those are public for the most part.
Yeah,
So
not
Northwestern.
Vanderbilt.
Yeah, like Northwestern and Vanderbilt. Like those are public schools. So you're going to have to see how much you're spending. Ohio State, I think there's been reports of how much that roster's cost, which is clearly a lot.
Well, their AD confirmed it. That's the thing.
Yeah,
that
that's
was
the thing.
funny.
Like he didn't care.
Yeah.
But like private universities at this point, like when all these public schools have to release how much they're spending, private universities don't have to do that. Like so, it's like it's a whole different like perspective on how you're building a roster and all that.
That's it for today's episode of the 1-0 podcast. We'll be back with you guys next week. For more football coverage, you can find us at psucollegian.com and follow us on socials.